Oh, she said that they come in or what? I'm putting my hair.
The rebuttals back and forth. There are no witnesses being called because
But we may ask questions.
Well, we may.
Okay.
So.
And can one side call upon somebody from the other side to answer a question?
We could go there.
You could call them to the stand to answer a question.
Like have a moment where it's like, Sarah Lamb, did you not just say?
Yes, you can hold people
Yes.
accountable for their statements.
We
Correct.
want you guys to turn into a bunch of drama queens and kings and kings and kings.
Just a bunch of
And we know you can do it.
Maybe don't.
You look the most like the part.
All right, so who would like to present first for the prosecution?
I thought we were gonna do it all. Like, never mind.
One at a time.
Yeah. No, I'll
You
talk
have
at
the
once.
floor.
Let us go back to August 4th, 1892, to the home of the Bordens. Lizzie Borden was a grown woman frustrated with the frugality that her father has forced upon her. Andrew Borden was a man of wealth, but shared little of that with Lizzie. It was well known that the Borden home was a house divided because of the very public, contentious relationship between Andrew's daughters and his second wife, Abby. A relationship that had once blossomed began to wilt, so Lizzie thought it was time to prune the family tree. The following is what we, the prosecution, believe to be made of the motives and evidence of Lizzie Borden's guilt in the brutal murders of Andrew and Abby Borden.
I'm going to hold you right there. That was an excellent opening
Yeah,
statement.
that was impressive.
Defense, you need an opening statement if you have one prepared or if you want to wing it. But I believe that's how it normally starts. Am I
Yes,
correct?
each side gives an opening statement.
So who is giving an
Give a
opening
general
statement for the
opening statement
defense?
as to what you intend to do in this case.
I was going to call you by your like fancy names. Judge, Mr. Howell, and Judge Mr. Bailey. Members of the jury. There's no jury, of course. Prosecution and defense side. Folks, we were gathered today here in representation of Lizzie Borden. She will be prosecuted under 3 accounts of murder. 3 accounts of murder that we believe have sustained evidence to prove she is not guilty. 3 accounts of murder that we believe that there's reasonable doubt to be blamed on someone else. 3 accounts of murder that have been justly admitted to our witness on this stance.
Excellent. Okay.
Excellent.
Where you're going.
All right. Prosecution.
Evidence.
Lizzie's visit to her friend Alice was a show of premeditation. Lizzie's is damaged by lying to the pharmacist. If she had indeed purchased prussic acid before, the pharmacy would have record of the purchase as per Massachusetts state law. It's important to note that Lizzie wanted the prussic acid to treat a stale cape, but the pharmacist stated that the acid is not used for fur and leather, but for killing fleas and ants. So if she wouldn't need the prussic acid. It's not used to treat a cape. So
I can hold that. Here we go.
Yeah, bring the
Objection. Objection.
We can hold that
She
one.
would have found that to take care of her pear trees to kill the bugs. It's a pesticide too. It would have been used like that. So she was trying to get it to take care of her garden and her pear trees.
objection, she specifically said
for
for cases.
Overrule. We have.
I object.
Go.
The gentleman pharmacist who said she was there that day could not remember what she wore, whether she had a hat or a bonnet, or whether, he also stated there was 2 other clerks in there, none of them could remember what she wore, whether it was a bonnet, what color her dress was, nothing, whether she was actually in there or not, because they said there could have been other ladies in there
Well, the
that
judge
day.
and I just went to 7-Eleven. I'll bet you the lady behind the counter doesn't remember either one of us.
I don't remember who was behind the counter.
And I don't remember her either.
Did you see a lady?
So
Your Honor?
that might be weaker argument. But
Your Honor,
we wanna know whether we should sustain this objection or not.
Your Honor, if I may, I've done the defense has done extensive research on hydrogen cyanide, which is prussic acid. It is used for fumigation, product fibers, dyes, and pesticides, just like the prosecution was mentioning. But in 1894, it was developed as a synthesis starting from coal, ammonia, and sodium, yielding sodium to cyanide. It was used for gold and silver cleaning too as well. It was also used for cereal grain, apricots, cherry pies, and various species of plants used for a source of nitrogen, pretty much for plants to feed themselves. And also was used for bacterial degradation of in soil and fungal fumigation. It was used pretty much to treat all their pear plants that she so much loved.
But
Regardless of the defense's lovely research, the witness clearly stated she was using it for a cape.
But she was also doped up on morphine, so she, muddled a lot of
not at that
Well,
time.
This would have been prior to the murder,
Yeah.
so.
Her clearly said.
Oh,
Also,
her statement,
I'd
her
like-
statement in court, okay.
I'd like to state that regardless of its purpose or application, that she needed a prescription and did not have one. In fact, if she lied directly to the pharmacist and her credibility was damaged because of it.
Can't argue with that.
That's,
Your Honor, if my client at some point
the point was the credibility.
Your objection is
So
overruled. Prosecution, continue.
Are you still on yours? Okay.
You want a motive? I'll give you a motive. Abby was killed at 9:30
Yeah, we want a
a.m.
motive, yeah.
Yeah, see?
Yeah.
Andrew was killed at around 11 a.m. The time difference between the deaths clearly demonstrates a motive. Lizzie desired her father's inheritance. Lizzie had to ensure that there was no doubt as to who died first. Had Andrew died before Abby, Abby's next of kin would have been the benefactors, and both Borden sisters would have been left destitute and penniless due to lack of will.
Is the prosecution trying to present a theory as proof? We want proof that Lizzie Borden committed these murders, not a theory as to what happened.
We are presenting our motives. We have evidence next.
Ooh. We were a little bit
We'll
premature.
wait to hear.
We look forward to the evidence.
Okay, with discussing evidence, a handleless axe was found on the Borden property, indicating the handle was broken off in a violent act. And on the head of the axe could have therefore been washed of blood. Furthermore, the wound on Mr. Borden's skull measured exactly to the length of that particular blade. Also, if it were a random perpetrator, considering there was no weapon found on the scene, they wouldn't have had time to dispose of the weapon so quickly, and surely would have been spotted carrying away from the property. Therefore, the handler of the weapon must have been familiar with the property and its means of disposal of such an item.
Worry about your case. You cannot, there's nothing to object to.
Okay, furthermore, according to Karen Elizabeth Cheney, the author of Lizzie Borden, an unidentified police officer stated that the perpetrator must have been a woman because a man would have struck more systematically and forcefully and would have cut deeper every time he struck and would crush rather than cut his victim.
Any other evidence?
Oh, well, yes. Also, we have a witness account of her dress being disposed of in the kitchen, where the police did not thoroughly search for such evidence. It was covered in, Alice had felt that it was, Lizzie had said it was covered in paint. Alice thought it could possibly be blood. And Lizzie tore up the gown and burned it.
So you're presenting a possibility as evidence that she was guilty.
Any other
You
evidence?
see where that undermines your entire case, because we're looking for anything, anytime you say it's a possibility, it means it's a
About this,
possibility that it wasn't.
regardless of whether or not blood was present, she was destroying evidence as everything in the murder, the crime
The rest
scene
was evidence.
evidence.
They're very good. Good answer.
Good
The rest
comeback.
was evidence. Don't say that it was, possibly it was blood, because they'll say possibly it wasn't, and all of a sudden reasonable doubt. So that was a good answer. That it was evidence. And that makes her culpable, but not necessarily guilty, but it's evidence against her. Do you agree, Judge?
But there's no way to test evidence that's been destroyed, and that was destroyed.
That's a black mark. Anything else that you want to present, that she is actually the one who wielded that particular axe? That, you know, the blows may have been struck by a woman, but was it Lizzie Borden? Were there other women in the house? Well, I don't want to run the defense's case for them, but again, I'm asking the defense. Or
Do you have
the
any
prosecution
other evidence to present as to why she is your suspect?
Why is she the one who was the woman who did it? And then you guys get your chance.
You get your chance. I know you're biting. You're biting at the bit. Just wait.
Stacy's having a good time.
I'll tell you what. We'll give a brief recess of about 2 minutes for you guys to discuss your case, because when you rest your case, then the defense has an opportunity. So, any other evidence, you know, as to why she is your suspect or number one suspect, would be now would be a good time to present that.
Well, Lizzie did inform Mr. Borden that Abby had stepped out because she received a note to go visit a sick friend. After Mr. Borden's body was found, Lizzie is the one that suggested that they go look for Abby, as in she was in the house. But at no point did they ever say that Abby had come home. So somehow Lizzie was suggesting that perhaps Abby was upstairs.
Any other evidence?
Not at this time.
Can we ask questions? Who else was in the home at that time?
Their maid Maggie.
Bridget.
Why did you decide that Maggie/Bridget was not involved or not a candidate for the?
She was not present during any of the murder. She was either outside of the house or up in the attic where she could not have witnessed anything.
And there were witnesses that said so, as in while she was cleaning the windows, she was talking with another maid outside. So she had an ironclad.
Also,
alibi.
Lizzie did suggest to Maggie that she should go to the dress sale, but Maggie said she wasn't feeling well, so Lizzie encouraged her to go upstairs to her attic bedroom and take a nap.
Didn't Lizzie herself also say at one time she was out in the back shed trying to prepare some fishing tackle? Was there any witness that she was out there?
No. Also, the police searched the grounds of the barn and found no evidence that Lizzie was ever out there at all.
No, Maggie also didn't have any motive, despite the fact that she might have been called Maggie instead of her proper name. She was paid much more than an Irish immigrant of that time would have been paid anywhere else.
Was there anybody else in the house during that week at all that we should know about?
Lizzie's uncle, John
Well,
Morris.
why couldn't he have had something to do with it, or should I hold that?
He was not present in the house during the time of the murders. He was away visiting.
His nieces, he was visiting his nieces, and they say that he was visiting them.
Due to the forensic evidence, we believe that
His
it was more
alibi
than
is
likely a
airtight.
female.
Objection. Oh,
No, we'll let
you're
Let him
present
finish.
here.
Let him finish.
We're just trying to find out.
I just want to try to help them along because you know, you've presented us with a lot of circumstances. Great
You've
job.
presented us with an
But
excellent motive.
you need to know, you know,
You've
is she the one who did it?
You've presented us with an excellent opening statement. Let me say those. Excellent motive, excellent opening statement. You've called her, what do I want to say? Her character into question. I'll say it that way.
Her credibility.
Right, her credibility, but we're still
That
not
doesn't make her
sold.
guilty.
You need to sell us on why is she the person that you are prosecuting? Why did you pick her?
Do you have any what they call prima facie evidence? You know what prima facie evidence is? Be like actual fingerprints or blood stains or footprint in the blood or eyewitnesses. That's prima facie, as opposed to circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial would be that she lied about the poison, or she lied about the dress, or she lied about this or that, or her credibility was shaken up a little bit. That's circumstantial. Now, you can find somebody guilty on circumstantial evidence. It's done all the time. But do you have any hard evidence, anything prima facie?
the fact that she was destroying evidence, I think is
That's
definitely a
circumstantial, that's
black mark.
circumstantial.
And also, as Jen mentioned, it's kind of a forensic thing to say that the marks and measurements on Mr. Borden's skull suggested that it was a woman using this weapon.
Had Morse been.
What is there to
closer-
suggest that Lizzie Borden was that woman?
Well, because
She
the
was
only
the
other
only one
woman
present
present
with
was the maid, Bridget, and she was outside with an eyewitness.
So you're saying that Lizzie had motive, she had the means,
And she had the access.
and she had motive, means, and
Access, the ability, the opportunity.
opportunity. And she did have opportunity. It's looking good.
Okay.
Motive, means, and opportunity have been established.
Anything else to
You guys have to
present?
establish reasonable doubt. They have established motive, means, and opportunity.
Anything else?
Listen carefully, because you guys get to rebut them when they're done.
Yes. Defense.
I'd like to set the floor to Stacy, please.
Okay.
I beg to differ. The uncle is the biggest problem here. He was having an affair with Bridget. Abby knew this, and Lizzie knew it. Lizzie didn't care.
It's first I
They were
heard.
having an affair. There was no note, but Bridget was supposed to tell Abby she needed to go visit her sister to get her out of the house so he could come back and have a little tryst with Bridget. Well, when she let him back in, because he came back, he watched Andrew leave, he came back, went into the house, Lizzie was downstairs at the time. Bridget told him that Abby was still there. So he went upstairs. Lizzie came up and said, "What's going on?" She said, "Well, Andrew forgot something, he came back to get it." When he went upstairs, Andrew was a butcher. He went up to get his meat cleaver and his apron, because he was trained when he lived in Falls River at one time by the Davis Meat Market. He went up to get his cleaver. When he went around to talk to Abby, Abby knew of the tryst and told him he wasn't allowed back in the house anymore. So he took the cleaver and whacked her in the head, knocked her to the floor, gave her, I forget, it was 18 more whacks. Came downstairs. Well, in the meantime, the noise that was heard by Lizzie and Bridget, she said, she was saying what it was. Oh, that he had forgotten his stuff, and they had, I forget what she said the noise was.
Moving furniture.
Oh yes, they were moving furniture around upstairs. That's what the noise was. So he had his cleaver and he left. Lizzie proceeded to do what Lizzie did, said she did. She went outside to the pears and so forth. Bridget knew that he had killed Abby and went outside. That's why she was outside puking, because it upset her so much. In the meantime, he left again, said he did his little trip, went and visited his nieces and all. The time they said was 11:20 when he left. He actually left at 10:20 because he passed Dr. Bowen. Dr. Bowen was heading to their house. He was going north, Dr. Bowen was coming south. So they didn't actually pass each other, but that was the timing of it, because he went back to the house of his niece. I guess he was checking up on them because they had been sick too. In the meantime, he goes on the trial, he does whatever he has to do. Of course, her dad comes back, he's laying on the couch. For some reason, he comes back in because he was told he could never come back again, took the cleaver and killed Andrew Borden. In the meantime, Lizzie was not in the house when all this was going on. But the murder was committed with a sharp object, but it was a meat cleaver.
And where do we get this picture of this meat cleaver? Is that
Your
the actual
Honor.
weapon, or is that just a sample of
This
the meat
is a
cleaver?
sample of a meat cleaver that was used
That's
in
not evidence in
18.
this case.
Your
That
Honor,
is not evidence in this case.
Your Honor, despite of the fact that our client was not aware of the disposal of the bodies and the separation of the heads of their parents and stepmother, it was sent to Harvard Medical School and it was returned back to the jury to be proved. Now, the holes on the skull did not match the murder weapon used, supposed to be a hatchet. Now, there's actually no blood on this. There's no human blood, I should say, on this hatchet. it was found to be animal blood on this hatchet. And the holes do not match with the hatchet to be as the weapon for the killing of father of Lizzie and the stepmother of Lizzie Borden.
Well, very good, then we might have picked out the wrong weapon, but that doesn't mean that Lizzie Borden still didn't kill her.
Well, hold on, they present their case and you get a rebuttal. So you're saying that hammer was tested
Yes.
and the test
It was
came
tested.
back that,
There was no human blood.
Could have been the pigeons because Lizzie was keeping pigeons in the barn and her father had taken that hatchet and was killing the pigeons.
But it was pigeon blood. And I want to make a comment, that Stacy made a tremendous little story there. It's a nice
it
story.
was an interesting story, one that.
Fascinating story. I've never heard it brought from that point of view, so I congratulate you. Where's your proof?
I have Lizzie's actual story.
Well, that's Lizzie's testimony. We need proof that Lizzie is telling the truth.
I have to find that for you.
George,
I know Abby knew about it.
Abby's dead.
I know Abby's dead.
Okay, but there's reasonable, all they have to do is present their reasonable doubt.
Reasonable doubt.
No, I find that.
In the
that's
absence
compelling,
of a person to, reasonable doubt.
I may want to believe that story, but I can't until I have.
So we would like to cede the floor to Hannah, please.
Hannah?
I just wanted to mention the dress because you guys mentioned that. Alice Russell, I believe, was the one who overheard the conversation, and the key word is overheard here. That does not mean that she heard the entire conversation. It might have been muffled. We don't know for sure, and there's no proof that it was blood on the dress. And also, a statement made, I think, just by the tour guide was, why would she, burn a dress while the police was around? There's no reason to, and if she's in the right mind, she wouldn't do that.
So it could be a social thing, because a woman of her social stature wouldn't have a painted, raggedy dress hanging up. She might not want, the community to know that she had such a garment.
Especially if she was one who wanted to go to the hills. She wanted to have the higher status. So if she had this raggedy dress that was messed up or something, why would she want it around the house? Anyone could see that.
And besides the fact that his father was tied to four influential systems: carpentry, banking, real estate, and mills. So we're talking about a widely known person, and we're talking about the reputation of my client to not be damaged. And just if our client wants to get rid of the dress, to not be embarrassed. Because if you think about it, there is many police officers outside my client's house. And these people and reporters are going through the trash. Trash on the public streets, it's public. So it's used to be researched for anyone and everyone. What my client just, as a good faith act, she just wanted to hide something valuable to her, and she didn't want to be embarrassed in front of everyone as to be worn or seen, be worn probably around the house, something that it was dirty.
She would have no use for it.
Don't want to damage her reputation.
However, her timing was ill-advised.
So I mean, might have been.
Your Honor, I say that the timing was,
We can't help them out at all, can
but also I just
You
want
can
to,
ask questions.
we? Was the house searched prior to the burning of the dress?
yes,
That day.
Your Honor, the
I-
house was searched. Do you want to talk about it?
I do have information. It was from the exact trial, and it was from John Morse. He stated the house was searched from top to bottom. They did not say, we do not allow you permission to search the house. He watched them as he searched every single bit of the house, including the attic. He tried opening a trunk, but he couldn't get it open. And he said, can we open the trunk? And he says, if you can get it open, I don't mind. Feel free to search the entire house.
So it is reasonable that they did search that pantry, saw the dress there, and ruled it out as being a piece of evidence.
Absolutely.
Of
Yes.
actual evidence with
And
blood
yet,
on.
John Morse is the uncle
Yes.
that you're saying did the actual killing.
Exactly.
So, well, if he's the guy that you're accusing of doing the actual killing, then how can he be credible in this testimony?
Your Honor, my client was cornered on the living room by police officers, and while during the autopsy or in the cleaning of the murder scene. Now, my client was being observed by several police officers, And Your Honor, there is many police officers searching the house for the murder weapon. You cannot just state based on the actual testimonies of someone that might be accused, or we are putting him as an accused person, to be based that as a fact, because very well this person might have been trying to imply my client.
May I add that during that time, I think fingerprinting was beginning to be used, was mostly in Chicago. I think we went over.
Chicago.
So they, especially in like a smaller town like that, they wouldn't be using it as much. So I think if John Morse was saying that, then he doesn't live there. Why would he have evidence there?
He wouldn't really have anything for it.
Yeah, he doesn't live there.
Do you guys rest your defense?
No,
we still
not
have
yet.
a few more pointers.
All right, we're going to go back to John Morse himself. But to know John Morse, we have to learn about Andrew Borden. Andrew Borden married the first wife. Her name was Sarah, but Sarah's last name was Morse. That was John Morse's sister. Sarah Morse died of a pelvic disease that is heretic, that can be passed through family members during childbirth. And that she also died while giving birth. He had a stillborn in birth. She passed away, but she also died of other complications. Not only that, and not only being the sister, but during the first marriage of Andrew Borden and Sarah Morse, Andrew Borden had an illegitimate relationship with someone else, because that is where William Borden, the alleged illegitimate half-brother of Lizzie and Emma, was born. And because of that reason, John Morse had right to be upset with Andrew Borden, because Andrew Borden slept with another woman and gave birth, had an illegitimate son, William Borden, during their first relationship, while married to his sister. And not just that, but then he talked about the meeting of the niece and nephew. I looked online and I read a report. The trolley driver actually admitted, stating that yes, he was on the train exactly at 11:22. I can point him out, and he stated I can point him out and say that yes, this was exactly John Morse on this trolley. So he had enough ample time between when he left and came back and going to his niece and nephew's house to commit the murders. And also stating that when he stated in the trial, when interviewed, he reported going back to the house, and when he first entered, he noticed that the front door lock was amiss. He noticed that anyone can open and close the lock because it was broken. He noticed that with just a click, with a click of a wrist and a turn of the switch, just so slightly, that anyone can close and enter the door with a push. But if someone was to try to use the key, they can't enter it.
Your Honor, if I may.
Okay. And then we've got these guys. Go ahead.
Your Honor, to give you motive and to finalize maybe your case, for now, the stepmother of Lizzie Borden and the father of Lizzie Borden were both very mean to Maggie or Bridget. So just I want to reinstate what my colleague Stacy said, that Bridget had an affair with the uncle. Now, there are many...
That's the question, how often had the uncle been visiting?
That's what I was going to try to get at. Because the uncle has been visiting the house several times, to the point that the stepmother, it's pretty much said to the uncle that these visits need to stop. Because, it was like up to the point that Bridget was not very well, was refuting back to, to the father and the stepmom, and was also not doing her job. So, pretty much, it's giving an ultimatum to the uncle that he was not allowed back on the house again.
And Terry, if I might, He did show up to the house with no clothes, no spare clothes.
In that barn on that day, it wasn't very hot, as everyone says. We did research. It was just a regular mild.
And
We'll take this under advisement.
Oh, okay. Any last statements, because they're wanting a rebuttal. I can see that they are
Go ahead.
anxiously waiting to attack back.
Go ahead.
Prosecution, rebuttal.
I would like to address what Stacy said first.
Okay,
Regarding Morse's profession.
okay.
Morse was a butcher. Had he actually brought a cleaver to the house, I don't think he would have hatched them to death in such a botched way. He the wounds on both victims are they're horrific. A butcher would have done it much more cleanly. He would have known exactly the points that he had to hit. He didn't have to hack away 19 times to the back of a woman's skull or at the back of the man's, He would have known just the simple cuts. He would have known exactly how to kill each victim in a way that wouldn't result in brain.
This was a crime of passion. And the first blow
It's the
was
same
the
anatomy.
killing
A
blow.
butcher knows that.
The first blow was the killing blow.
They get their rebuttal, then you get your rebuttal. Prepare your rebuttal. This is like
Furthermore,
Family
Andrew
Feud.
was killed in such a way that brain matter from the brain was scattered all over the room.
And-
That's a
and
little
where'd you
bit
get that?
beyond,
How did she know
and James
brain
Morse
matter?
has no motive to do something as brutal as that.
Just to Mitchell's, the crime of passion that he's saying John Morse killed him on crime of passion. Why did he wait around 30 years to all of a sudden be passionate about a man's affair? And why kill the wife when she had nothing to do with it?
I am not trying to point out who's the killer.
Just responding.
It would seem to be a little odd.
You can answer these at.
Also, to reiterate on that, I feel as if the defense is trying to pinpoint John Morse as the guilty person here based on circumstantial evidence, and therefore trying to find Lizzie Borden innocent based on other people's circumstantial evidence.
And using the testimony of the same man to prove their case when they're also trying to incriminate him.
And if John Morse was on that trolley at 11:22, when did he have the time to get to another town if Andrew Borden was murdered at 11 o'clock?
Is he magic as well as great in bed as well as a murderer? Is that what's
Also, as far as the weapons go, there were 3 weapons in question, and 2 of them had what was found to be animal and blood and hair on them. But the one that we have as forensic evidence is the handleless hatchet that had no blood on it because the handle was removed, probably in a violent act, a violent strike.
Which an expert said that could have been washed with blood because of the damage with rust.
And the measurements match the wounds on the skull. Also, to say that she was not in her right mind when discussing the dress, that can't be, that's excusable, because that would be pleading insanity.
Well, here's insanity. I'll clear up on insanity. The insanity defense means that at the time of the crime, she did not know right from wrong. There are 2 different legal standards. One is called insanity. At the time of the crime, the person didn't know right from wrong. The McNaughton rule is the most common, the easiest version of that. The other issue is competency to stand trial. Competency to stand trial has to do with her ability to represent herself in a fair trial. If she was on drugs after the crime, she might not be competent to stand trial, but that does not mean that she was incompetent at the time of the crime. In other words, you could be sane and then lose your insanity or be incompetent later. So you guys are saying that at the time of the crime, she was not insane. She was not on drugs. And so the bottom line is, whether she burned the dress later while being insane is under this state of drugs is irrelevant. At the time of the crime, she was consciously aware of what she was doing, and it was premeditated. Is that
Yes.
what I'm understanding?
Yes.
Anything else?
Anything else as a rebuttal? They've presented some arguments that Lizzie Borden wasn't the only one that could have done this crime, that there was some potential for someone else. You're saying that that's not possible. Is that what we're hearing?
Right. And also there's the whole story of the affair. We don't have any evidence.
There is evidence said by my witness.
Who's your witness?
It is on the paper. Can you bring that up?
So you're saying the actual person that had the affair is claiming that
So
it
the
is.
main witness. So then John Moore says that
witnesses to
because
this
you're trying to
murder.
incriminate him.
Yeah, there are no
He's saying
witnesses.
the wrong thing. It
No,
was
the only
Lizzie's
people
story.
who know are dead.
It was Lizzy's statement during the trial.
And we can trace them.
But we have been showing her incredibility.
She's not truthful. She's not truthful with the druggist, so she's not truthful with whether there was an affair or not. I mean, that's all. We don't know if any of that is true because we don't know if she ever
You can't
tested.
take her word.
There was one. Can I throw this out? There was one other bit of evidence that I haven't heard presented. Well, I guess I'll wait. We'll have that in our deliberations. Okay.
Defense?
Anything else is a rebuttal?
All right.
All right, your rebuttal.
I'm going to rebuttal back to not just the dress, but also to the acts. We're going to pretend that there was a body laying on the floor. The first blow, Lizzie Borden was about my size. She was about 5'4". She weighed less than 120 pounds. That was stated. And when person in the Victorian era, the way they dressed, Lizzie Borden came back from a trip to Europe. She brought back new clothes, including a corset. She wore a corset that very day under her dress, tied so tightly. Remember the medical museum showing the effects of corsets. It tightens. Remember, watch Pirates in the Caribbean and the whole falling off into the river and seams. The corsets are so tight, it prevents a lady from sometimes even being able to breathe, that they have to use smelling salts to be able to rebreathe again to wake them up. Now, if she was to commit this murder with the axe, she would have to wear the dress, bend over, and whack, furiously a few thousand times. But then the axe or the hatchet would get lodged into the head, and they would have to pull it out like this. And if someone wearing a corset that's pulled tightly would keep doing that for 13 or 14 times. We tried it last night as a demonstration. We tried whacking, and after the 5th or 6th time, we got tired and we were out of breath. And the dress that she wore was not a summer dress. It was a blue fall winter dress that she wore.
Your final statement.
Everyone stated that it was so hot outside. Why was she, of all people, decide to wear a blue fall winter dress? The weather was only 78 degrees.
Might I add is that many witnesses saw that 5 people who saw her within 15 minutes after the second murder did not see a drop of blood on her person at all, on her clothes, on anything. And because of that heavy attire, and especially a corset, there's no way she'd be able to take that off by herself or quickly in general. So how would she be clean whenever people were coming running to her house?
Mrs. Churchill said, one of the neighbors that came to sit with Lizzie said she looked pale and distraught. So she was obviously shaken up from seeing her father butchered.
Could she not have been shaken up from having committed a crime?
She probably would have been out of breath and chanting. They didn't say that she was exhausted from attentioning her father. She said that she looked shaky and scared.
Interesting.
Your Honor, there's some coincidence that she was also a mortician. She's been around bodies. The fact that my client was unreactable, I remember, that she did not react how you expect to see in a dead body is because of the claim. Now, Your Honor, I do not want to point the uncle as the killer. I am simply pointing the options that could pretty much explain that my client was not the one who murdered their parents. Molly stated that I was trying to prove Lizzie couldn't do it or haven't done it. I am simply trying to state possibilities that could have happened.
Very good, very good.
Your Honor, the distance between the house that could have taken the uncle, we measured and it was 1.8 miles. It could have easily be done in 20 minutes. Your Honor, whenever the uncle could have arranged to run to visit his family members. He could have very well hidden the clothes in there, or very well could have had any help from Bridget since they were having an affair, and then come back on the trolley, remember every single little detail because his life depended on it. Now, I just want to say something.
Well, remember, you have closing argument or closing statement. If they'll present their closing statement, you'll present yours. So any other rebuttals to their arguments?
Yeah, Stacy.
Go ahead.
First, there was a lack of premeditation because prior to the battering, they all said that Lizzie wanted to poison their parents. No toxin was found in them. They didn't find any toxin at all. There was a lack of blood evidence. Clothing from the victims, Lizzie and all were examined. They didn't find any blood on any of Lizzie's, Emma's, or Bridget's clothing anywhere. And there was a lack of a murder weapon. They found that broken handle hatchet, but there was nothing on the hatchet to prove that that hatchet was used.
Could have been anything.
And you're presenting that it could have been some other item.
It could have, or it could have been it might have been the cleaver, it might have been another hatchet. But because there's no blood evidence and no evidence on that hatchet, there's a lack of a murder weapon.
So do we now, they're done with their rebuttals, Terry?
You want to give your last argument?
This is your final statement.
We'll deliberate, and then you guys get to give one last
This is
statement.
your final statement.
Suggesting that Lizzie Borden was wearing a corset because she brought back the latest fashions from Europe is speculation. There's no proof that she was actually wearing one. Also, it's irrelevant if she was wearing a corset in murdering her victims because the first blow is the one that killed each individual victim. That's all it took. The rest was just vicious hacking.
All she had to do was get the blade over her head and let gravity do the work. She didn't need to heave and hoe for however long to do it.
So closing statement. We're still waiting for the closing statement.
Wrap it up as to what she's guilty.
You're imagine we're the jury and you're gonna, just like you did, just like you opened, which by the way, was excellent. Just like you opened, we want you to close it that way.
In other words, you're saying, please, your honors, find her guilty because.
Yes. Because the opening statement kicked some ass. It was pretty damn good. Your statement was pretty good too, Mitch. I'm telling you, but their statement was pretty good. Yeah, it got me hooked right from the start. Do you want 5 minutes? We'll give you 5 minutes to collect your closing. 5
Both
minutes.
sides, 5 minutes to get your closing arguments. We're gonna get a drink of water.
Do you want to walk outside and let them
Yeah,
work on this?
we're gonna walk outside, let you work on that. We will be back in 5, and then you get closing arguments, then we deliberate, then we decide.
After you, as we go to our chambers.
Yes.
The same pattern mentioned by John Morse himself during his
Us. Oye, oye.
Oh yeah. You can still work on this. We're relaxed.
Yeah, you guys need an entire law office, that's the way you guys are.
You need a law library.
Oye, oye. Take just a little bit of trim around the ears, please. And,
I'm assistant justice.
and so we went to the theater that night. My husband was sitting next to me. We were enjoying a nice little play. And all of a sudden, the shot rings out and ruined the entire play for me that entire evening.
I can't believe those actors did that crime. It was a sin.
It was terrible. But I overcame it and had a nice weekend anyway.
Yes.
Was it, but
The missus and I, we didn't let that interrupt our sex life.
was the acting done in the booth?
Oh, that was both done.
Oh, that's pretty good. Play on words. We haven't talked about what our thoughts are on the case. We merely walked down the case from there.
It's in my page.
I didn't have any violations, but my house and my bedroom was later before. When you get south of Pennsylvania, you feel like you need to talk like this to kind of fit in with the population. Am I
We
correct?
are ready to hear the
Closing statements
of
the prosecution.
prosecution, your final chance of the closing statement. Why should we find her guilty?
Why should we find her guilty?
Lizzie Borden showed signs of premeditation. She had reasons for wanting both Abby and Andrew dead, as well as the opportunity to do the deed, based on actual forensic measurements, comparing the wounds on the victim's skulls to the size of the handleless axe that was found. We, the prosecution, hereby rest our case and hope that the court finds Lizzie Borden guilty with motive, opportunity, and evidence of the crime as committed by she herself. She killed Abby and Andrew.
Boom. Mic drop.
Case closed, yeah. Defense.
Defense.
Your Honor, and members of the jury, Lizzie Borden was a valuable member of the community. She was a precious member of the school, and she worked with children. Your Honor, on this trial, there was animal blood found in the hatchery. There was no murder weapon proven or be linked to the actual murders. Your Honor, during the entire trial, our client was being constantly injected with morphine, up to 1/8 of morphine with regular injections for 10 months. Your Honor, morphine side effects state mood changes, hallucinations, confusions, pain. Your Honor, there is just being presented by the prosecution that Lizzie was a premeditated person. Your Honor, it was many cases stated that Lizzie loved her father. It is all circumstantial evidence. There is no blood or solid evidence linking the murders to our client.
And with that, we shall go deliberate. We will come back and render our decision as soon as we come up with one. You guys have to sit tight.
That's where we adjourn back to our chamber.
Meanwhile, the court is in recess. You may go out and use the slides, the swings, or the.
You shall
And I
return.
will get my shoes, so as soon as you're done, you can see this.
But everybody stick
Look at
around.
this.
Good job, guys.
T-Row, got second to past favorite.
Ah.
He's now past favorite.
That happened tonight, eh?
It did.
That was like.
See, in my book, it made it sound like Lizzie had an affair with her own uncle.
So see, it's all,
In
it's
fact,
all.
I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
It's all
Isn't it?
That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying, it's all,
I don't know.
it's all.
I personally.
Because
think-
do you
Whoever
remember
wins,
the
whoever
do you remember the
Like,
tour
I don't-
guide telling us that
You don't
their
know
dinner
what to do.
guests
I
heard?
don't buy that Lizzie did.
Do you remember the tour guide telling
I know,
us that
this
the
stuff.
dinner guests overheard a conversation between Lizzie and her dad in the next room? Well, in this book, it says that that conversation was about her potentially being pregnant
Oh,
with John
really?
Morris because they had an affair and she had been pregnant at one point but never had a child. She had like miscarried. And that it was something about tarnishing their reputation, like no one could find out.
I mean, either way, if we're going with like the John Morris, more like John Morris doing it.
All in all, all in all.
No, we're just saying about that affair business in the
Mine's more active.
I'm not sure she did do it.
I think she did. I really do think she did.
I don't know.
That's why.
Or maybe she.
I did that for 8 months straight, and the medicine was helping.
My friend does that with her.
Well,
and that's what she noticed.
Honestly, I think
My sister gets bronchitis.
that her and the maid did it together.
I think the
I
uncle.
think the maid, I think the maid
I
had
think
something
the
to do
two
with it.
sisters
I just think it
and
would
the
make the
uncle all
most
run it
sense
together.
because if
I
it
think
was
my
just
first
if it was
idea
just
was that
Lizzie
I
and
don't
the maid
know,
at home,
yeah.
at what point
I
does
think
that
she
mean
was
seriously not her
that
body
was
in the floor?
figure.
You know?
How can she not hear
I wanted to
some?
prove everyone else.
I mean, we were in that house. We saw how closely, like, yeah, it's a huge house, but things are closely laid out. You know, like nothing is far away enough.
They're all
you
wouldn't
wouldn't
hear
enough.
Yeah, they're all
You know, something else interesting, they, you know,
It don't matter, they have to be able to
be
get back
proper,
in.
so they wanted to move the bodies. And her dress is like you and everything, Abby's, so like they moved her. And originally, this something I
What we
found,
found
that
is
her
that
head
the
was near the
body
baby board, not
Yeah,
necessarily the
between
bed.
the mirror and
So
the bed.
you know, like you guys didn't bring it up, but like they said, oh, someone could have seen her body right there, but she probably was farther back. She was by the baseboard. It was actually really interesting. The Dr. Bowen guy mentioned that in one of his things. I don't know where it is.
Yeah, they're all guilty and all had something.
They're all
to do with
guilty.
it.
Yeah, everybody, they're all guilty.
But they're all
Emma and
suspicious. Which
Uncle.
whole thing is just.
Burn them.
They all did. Yeah, they're all witches.
Yeah, he said they found Abby lying perfectly still with
Yeah, my
both
stomach's
arms
just
under
hurting.
her and a couple feet away from the mop board, which is what
We
we call
use this
baseboard.
bathroom, no one's in this room.
Go for it.
I don't have to
Tear it
it's
up.
just it hurts.
Tear it up, girl.
Tear it up. Your own personal bathroom.
Tear it up.
Order in the court. Order in the court.
It's okay, I'm here.
We have reached a verdict.
Yes, sir.
The Honorable Justices.
At this time,
Yes, sir.
please put your cell phones on silence.
Yes.
After due deliberation, the judges in this case, the state versus Elizabeth Borden, we've decided to take pity on her because after all, she's an orphan. No, I'm just kidding. We have come up with the verdict that is a verdict that has reached an impassable state of 1 guilty, 1 not guilty. Meaning that both sides win up to a point. Now, we are not doing this to be nice, we just can't agree ourselves. And we're not gonna tell you who found her guilty and who found her not guilty. We don't wanna think anybody's, that we're taking sides or have you take sides with us. But that's the point that we're at. However, that isn't the end of it, David.
And I'll point out the two major things that we've struggled with. The prosecution has presented a very strong case of motive, means and opportunity. By the same token, the defense has presented some alternatives that do raise questions. And so that's where kind of our impasse is, I think. As a result, it is a hung jury. And in terms of a murder trial like this, that means that since there is a hung jury,
She walked.
She walks.
she walks.
Gesture, gesture.
Now, in real life, in a hung jury situation,
There would be a retrial.
there would be a retrial, and you guys would get to represent your information, represent.
But you don't wanna do this again tomorrow night.
No, in real life, that's what you would do, and you would take, now that you know what their hand has been played, you would go back and do much research in making sure that that was not a possibility to really further solidify your case. And of course, you know where they're headed with their case. And so you would work even harder at trying to solidify alternatives.
So prosecution, you fought a valiant battle to reach a tie. And the tie is